Hello. Hi everybody. Welcome back to the Remnant Christian Book Reading. I know it's been a little while, unless you're binge watching right now and you are on this video. I've been out for a couple months, just because I've been unsure if I wanted to continue doing this or not. But I'm back because it seems like a couple people, a small handful would like for me to keep going, so I'm back. Please excuse me. Right now my mouth is in pain. It's nothing too crazy, it's just in pain. It's kind of sore. But yeah, I'm gonna try my best to do the reading. If I have to take a second to breathe, it's just because my mouth is tired. And I'm gonna still try and do the voices like I normally do. If I can't, well, we're just gonna do it in my own voice for as much as I can, or as well as I can. Anyway, right now we are in chapter 11 of the Society. If you haven't watched any earlier videos, definitely check them out. This is basically right now to do a quick recap, and if you haven't watched any other video, stop, go back, go watch the other videos, because of what I say is not going to make sense to you. Definitely go check it out. And if you don't care to, you want to just start here, that's fine too. I'm going to give a brief recap. So basically there's this two siblings, Becca and Scott, and they live with their mother, and they just moved in to, I believe it was, I forgot the exact name, but they moved into California from Brazil. Their father died, and he was a missionary. He died when he was flying a plane, and they know what witchcraft or brujeria, if you know Spanish, is. And they experienced it in Brazil as missionaries. Now they're here in California, and now they're dealing with the same thing, except now they are dealing with it face to face. And so right now we're at a part where it's getting down, and the confrontation between Christians and witchcraft, people who do witchcraft or practice it, are going to do a small face-off, and it's about to go crazy. So if you're ready, I hope you're ready, but if you're not, buckle your seatbelts, because it's going to be a wild ride. So, chapter 11 of the Society. That was a brief recap, and now we're into the book. Chapter 11. Halfway through the first lap, Becca knew her friend was in trouble. Like always, Julie pulled away from the group of runners early. But this time there was a problem. This time the trio from Royal had also pulled away from the pack. And now they were pulling away from Julie. With every stride they took, they moved farther and farther ahead of her. The reason was obvious, even from Becca's position. Back in the pack, she could see that Julie's concentration, was gone. Totally. Instead of her easy, graceful strides, Julie was pumping and fighting and struggling. Instead of a fluid body that glided across the track, she was all elbows and knees. Come on, Julie, Becca thought. Concentrate. Focus. By the end of the first lap, it was worse. Julie was a dozen meters ahead of Becca and the pack, but she was over a dozen meters behind the kids from Royal. Even with 3 laps to go, it appeared the race was over. Once again, Royal High would take the 1600. Once again, Julie would be bumped out of a chance to go to state. Everyone knew it. Everyone but Rebecca. As they started the second lap, Becca clenched her jaws in steeled determination. She took several deep breaths, and then, to everyone's amazement, Rebecca Williams began to sprint. Coach Simmons looked on in disbelief. "Not now!" she yelled. "It's too early! What are you doing?" But Becca knew exactly what she was doing. She knew that if she started her sprint this early, she'd be too exhausted to finish. She knew that if she killed herself on this race, she'd have nothing left for the other races. She wouldn't qualify for anything. And yet, despite all of that, she still dug her cleats in and pushed harder. She moved across the pack, or through the pack, passing one runner after another. At last, she pulled to the front. Julie was still 15 meters ahead. The three girls from Royal were 30. As they passed Coach Simmons, the woman shouted at Becca, "You're too early, you'll have nothing left." Becca paid no attention. She pressed on. They finished the second lap. Julie's strides were as unfocused and clumsy as ever. Meanwhile, Becca methodically closed the gap between them, from 10 meters to 8 to 5. Up in the stands, Chrissy sat with 50 or so other students watching. "Look at that," she cried. "Becca's challenging her, just like at practice. I told you she was a user." Philip, her boyfriend, nodded. But Ryan wasn't so sure. "I don't think so, Chrissy," he said. "Look." Gradually, Becca eased up beside Julie. Now they ran side by side. Becca's lungs were beginning to hurt again. She could never go the remaining 2 laps at this pace, but that didn't matter. Julie glanced at her. There was no missing the fear in her eyes. But Becca was not challenging her. She neither pulled ahead nor dropped behind her. Instead, she stayed right at her side. Coach Simmons looked on in astonishment. She shook her head. Could it be? Was Becca doing what she thought she was doing? Rebecca stayed glued to Julie's side, and then through labored breathing she began to shout, 1, 2, 1, 2! Her rhythm was rock steady, like a metronome. 1, 2, 1, 2! Back in the stands, Chrissy demanded, "What's going on? What is she trying to prove?" "I'm not sure," Ryan said. "But I think Rebecca's pacing her." "She's what?" "She's giving her a count, a rhythm to follow." Becca continued. Running at Julie's pace was hard enough, but to use up her air by counting out loud made it even harder. 1, 2, 1, 2. Gradually, Julie fell into the rhythm. She began running with Becca, stride for stride. Her concentration returned. Her fighting and struggling smoothed into the ease and grace for which she was known. Becca continued counting, fighting for breath. 1, 2, 1, 2. They moved ahead, the two of them together, gaining on the Royal runners. "Atta girl!" Coach Simmons shouted. "Keep her steady, keep her steady! 1, 2, 1, 2! They finished the third lap. One more to go. Becca's throat was raw, like she'd worn a groove in her windpipe. Her lungs screamed for more air. She had never run at this pace for this long. Her arms were becoming dead weight. Her legs were turning to rubber. She could not go another lap, and she still counted. 1, 2, 1, 2. They passed the first runner from Royal. The girl looked up in shock and surprise, but there were still 2 more to go. It was time to pick up the pace. Becca knew Julie couldn't sprint, but they'd still have to move faster. Somehow, somewhere, Becca found the strength to push them ahead. 1, 2, 1, 2. They passed the second runner. Becca stumbled, regained her balance, and continued. Her head was light, her legs almost useless. She was losing control and she knew it, but she kept pushing. Half a lap, 2 runners down, 1 to go. Becca stumbled again. Julie glanced at her in concern. Go! Becca gasped. Keep counting faster! Julie picked up the cadence. 1, 2, 1, 2. But it was over for Becca. Her legs had no feeling, no control. She had pushed them too far, and now, finally, they gave out. She stumbled and lunged face first toward the track. The crowd gasped as she hit the cinders and slid, as the red stones dug and slashed into her knees and arms. It was almost a repeat performance of her first day at practice. Almost, but not quite. She quickly staggered to her feet, gasping for air, looking toward the finish line. Focus! She shouted with her last ounce of energy. Focus! It was doubtful Julie heard. She was concentrating too hard on the runner ahead. Inch by inch, she closed the gap. Thanks to Becca, she had found her rhythm. But more important, she had found the inspiration. After all Becca had done, after all she had sacrificed for her, how could Julie let her down? She couldn't. She wouldn't. For the first time in her life, Julie reached deep into herself, and for the first time in her life, she found a sprint. It wasn't much, but it was enough. 1, 2, 1, 2. Faster and faster she ran. 10 meters to go. Julie crept forward until she pulled alongside the final royal runner. The girl was so startled that her own concentration faltered. That was all it took. Julie stretched out the last few strides. 5 meters, 2 meters. She stuck out her chest, and with one final push, she hit the tape a fraction of a second before the girl from Royal. The crowd went wild. They ran, shouting onto the field. Julie staggered to a stop in their arms. She bent over, trying to catch her breath as the PA blasted out the time and announced the news. That's a new district record, ladies and gentlemen. Julie Mitchell has just set a new record. Spectators cheered. Team members hugged her and slapped her on the back. But Julie barely noticed. She was too busy looking through the crowd to the other side of the field. There, Rebecca stood all alone. Her hair messed, her knees raw and bleeding. The old Becca would have been embarrassed, beyond belief. But, at least for now, this new Becca didn't care. For now, it was just the two of them on the field. No people shouting praises, no PA announcing records, just two friends. Slowly, Becca raised her hand. Blood ran down her arm as she lifted her index finger. The gesture was simple, but Julie immediately knew what it meant. Numero uno. Julie returned the salute, raising her own hand, pointing her own finger. As she did, her eyes filled with moisture. Tears spilled onto her cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness or even tears for joy. They were for Becca. They were tears of gratitude. And right there, that's where I'm gonna stop, because my mouth is kind of hurting. Actually, you know what? Let me see how long chapter 12 is. Okay, I'll read chapter 12. I'll read chapter 12, and this is the end of the book. Totally rad! Squawk! Totally rad! Totally rad! Cornelius waddled across the deck as Daryl and Scott stared at the computer screen. The bird picked up a pencil in his mouth and began bobbing up and down with it, but no one paid attention. I'm still mad you didn't tell me you were going to the bookshop. Daryl squeaked in his unusual high-pitched voice. I wanted to see you do your stuff. I told you, Scott repeated. I didn't go to put on a show. Just the same. Everybody in the society is pretty steamed. Scott shrugged as he entered the chat room. I was only trying to help. As they looked at the screen, Daryl gave an unusually loud sniff. Scott threw him a look. By now, the sniffing had really gotten on his nerves. He was thinking about giving the guy a gift certificate for tissues or maybe a lifetime supply of Dristan. When the information suddenly came up on the screen, it was another message from Z. Is that the guy you were telling me about? Daryl asked. Scott nodded as he moved and clicked his mouse. I'm not sure who he is, but he's like this real expert on... Suddenly, Z's message came onto the screen. It wasn't long, but it definitely... excuse me. It wasn't long, but it definitely carried a wallop. New kid. Congratulations on your victory. But remember, it is only the first battle. The war has just begun. Z. Both boys stared at the screen. Daryl was the first to speak. His voice was higher and even more unsteady than usual. Oh, how'd he know? It was just a few hours ago. How'd he know? Scott slowly shook his head. There was a lot about Z he didn't know, and what did he mean the war had just begun? Squawk! Make ready! Squawk! Cornelius was now jabbing at Scott's shoulder with a pencil he held in his beak. Scott reached over and scraped the nape of the little fellow's neck. The bird stretched his head in ecstasy, but Scott barely noticed. He was too busy staring at the screen, wondering. That's enough for now, Mom said as they dumped the contents of another box from the garbage into a plastic garbage can. If we do just one or two of these a day, we'll get through them in no time, she said, wiping her hands. Since they were together and since there was still some daylight, neither of them felt too uneasy about being in the garage. If they did, they didn't show it. Except, of course, for their frequent glances toward the boxes at the far wall. Becca hated the idea of being afraid in her own garage. It ticked her off. She was determined to get to the bottom of the mysterious light and sounds. And she would. Soon. Count on it. But not tonight. Tonight she was too bushed. The track meet had taken too much out of her. Instead, she followed Mom into the kitchen, grabbed the garbage under the sink, and went back out to dump it into the second plastic garbage bag. Garbage can. Then, with more than the usual grunts and groans, she dragged the two cans down the drive to the curb. Tomorrow was pickup day, and putting out the trash was one of her chores. She flipped Scott for that, or for cleaning Cornelius' cage, and for once in her life she won. Or so she thought. Need a hand with that? Becca looked up with a start. It was Ryan. Once again he had caught her hauling trash. Once again she was an unkept sweatball. Hi, Ryan, she stammered as she instinctively straightened her hair, as if it would do any good. He waited. Remembering he asked questions, she frantically searched her mind. What did he say? Something about helping? Oh, yeah. No, thanks, she replied. I'm just setting these two garbage cans out on the curb. He nodded. What a stupid answer, she thought. Of course I'm setting the cans out on the curb. Anybody can see that. But Ryan didn't seem to notice her lapse of intelligence. Listen, he coughed slightly. I saw what you did out on the track this afternoon. It was pretty impressive. Becca started to protest, but he continued, No, it was cool. And, well, I'm sorry if we, gave you a rough time or anything. Becca shrugged. It wasn't that bad, she lied. He looked at her. Was it her imagination, or were those blue eyes sparkling slightly? Suddenly, Ryan remembered something. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Julie's leather pouch. She said it was in her gym basket all along. Guess she just didn't see it. He held out the pouch to Becca. It almost cost her the race, so she figures it's not so lucky after all. She said you'd know what to do with it. Becca reached out and took the pouch into her hand. She wanted to say something, but once again her voice was on vacation, along with her mind. It was the same trip they always took when this guy was around. The silence grew. They both shifted slightly. Well, I guess I'll see you tomorrow, he finally said. Yeah, Becca croaked. Tomorrow. Ryan turned and sauntered up the street. Rebecca glanced back down at the charm in her hand. The charm. All that trouble over a leather pouch with a bunch of stupid rocks and stuff inside. Well, it was over now. Without a further thought, she dropped it into the garbage. Oh, hey. Ryan turned back to her. I got tickets to this hot speaker coming to the library next week. The Ascension lady gave them to me. Becca looked at him. He shrugged. It's some reincarnation guy claiming to be Napoleon in some past life. Guess he's going to give a demonstration. Want to come? Rebecca continued to stare. She knew her mouth was hanging open, but there wasn't much she could do about it. Ryan waited another second before continuing. Well, think about it. Maybe you can let me know tomorrow. With that, he turned and headed up back the street. Becca closed her eyes. Could it be? Could this whole thing be starting all over? The Ascension lady? Reincarnation? Oh, brother, Rebecca thought, taking a deep breath and slowly letting it out. Here we go again. And that is the end of the society. That was pretty good, huh? I had a little bit of trouble reading. I don't know if you could tell, but it was it was a good ending. I was wrong in the beginning. This wasn't the climax. The climax was in the last two chapters. This was kind of like, the ending of it. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. Also, I wanted to do a little announcement. If you're watching on YouTube, this doesn't apply to you. If you're watching on Facebook Live, this does. I'm going to stop doing the Facebook Lives. And from now on, you'll be able to find the videos on YouTube itself. So, that's great. So no one has to worry about catching me while I'm live or any of that stuff. It's just gonna go straight to YouTube. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this book. Sorry it took me so long to do the final 2 chapters. If you guys have any recommendations or ideas for me, go ahead and you can leave them in the comment section. If you want to, you're more than welcome to come to our Facebook group, the Remnant Christian Book Reading and Bible Studies. Very soon, hopefully, God willing, we'll be able to do some Bible studies. I have some books but we'll get to that later on. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed The Society, and if you don't quite remember everything that happened, you're more than welcome to watch it all again. It's a good book, and I have, in this series, we have like 11 more books to go, so we have some stuff to do. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this. My name is Joel, and yeah, I'm from the Christian book reading, The Remnant, and we'll catch you in the next book. Bye, everybody. God bless you.